March 1997. While most Americans were logging onto the Internet for the first time, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society was quietly implementing a different kind of digital system. A system that would collect, catalog, and protect information about something far darker than most people could imagine. That month, Watchtower sent a letter to each of its 10,883 congregations across the United States, and to thousands more congregations worldwide. The letter contained instructions that would create what multiple courts, investigative journalists, and legal experts now believe to be one of the world's largest databases of undocumented alleged offenders. The instructions were simple. The implications were catastrophic. And the system they created is still operational today. This isn't speculation. This isn't rumor. This is documented policy, revealed through court orders, leaked documents, and testimonies under oath. And at the center of it all is something that sounds almost absurdly simple: a blue envelope. The 1997 letter didn't arrive with fanfare. It came through regular mail channels to congregation elders, the men who serve as local religious authorities within Jehovah's Witness communities. The letter's stated purpose, according to documents later obtained through litigation, was to address the legal risk posed by possible offenders within its ranks. Let's pause there. Legal risk. Not victim protection. Not community safety. Legal risk. The organization was worried about liability, about lawsuits, about financial exposure. And their solution wasn't to create better safeguards. It was to create a tracking system. The letter laid out a specific protocol. If congregation elders had knowledge of someone accused of serious misconduct against minors, known or suspected, they were instructed to write a detailed report. Not to police. Not to protective services. To Watchtower headquarters in New York. The report had to answer 12 specific questions. Was this a one-time occurrence, or did the accused have a history of such conduct? How is the accused viewed within the community? Does anyone else know about the allegations? Has the accused lived down any notoriety in the community? What is the personal information of the perpetrator? What is the age of the victim? How frequently did the incidents occur? How do the authorities view the accused? These weren't questions designed to protect vulnerable individuals. These were questions designed to assess risk management, to calculate exposure, to determine whether an accused person could be quietly managed or whether the organization faced public scandal. And here's the critical instruction that came with this questionnaire. Mail it to Watchtower headquarters in a special blue envelope. Keep a copy in your congregation's confidential file. And do not share it with anyone. What Watchtower did with those blue envelopes is what turned a disturbing policy into a legal and moral catastrophe. According to testimony given under oath in multiple court cases, the organization scanned every report that arrived in those blue envelopes and entered them into a Microsoft SharePoint database. Names, addresses, descriptions of alleged misconduct, congregations where the accused operated. All searchable, all centralized, all secret. The existence of this database was first revealed publicly in 2012 during a lawsuit filed by Jose Lopez, a man who had been victimized as a child by Gonzalo Campos, a Jehovah's Witness who would later be promoted to the position of elder despite the organization knowing about his history. When Lopez's attorney, Erwin Zalkin, demanded that Watchtower turn over all documents related to Campos and other accused individuals, the organization initially claimed it had no such records. But during depositions, a senior Watchtower official testified to the existence of the database. And then the organization did something that would set a pattern for the next decade. It refused to hand over the documents. How many names are in this database? That's been the subject of wide speculation and conflicting claims. In 2002, one former elder estimated the number at 23,720 alleged perpetrators. Watchtower disputed that figure but refused to provide an accurate count. During the Lopez trial, a Watchtower attorney testified that the organization had received 775 blue envelopes between 1997 and 2001 alone. That's just 4 years. That's just documented reports that made it to headquarters. And that doesn't account for the 2 decades that followed. The Australian Royal Commission into Institutional Responses examined Watchtower's practices in that country and found records of 1,006 alleged perpetrators involving more than 1,800 victims since 1950. And critically, not a single one of those cases had been reported to police by the organization. When Erwin Zalkin, the attorney representing Jose Lopez and later other survivors, demanded access to the database, Watchtower deployed every legal tactic available. They argued First Amendment protections. They claimed clergy penitent privilege. They insisted that producing the documents would be unduly burdensome, with one official testifying it would take a full-time employee 28 years to search through files from over 14,000 congregations. They argued that Watchtower and its related corporate entities were separate organizations with no obligation to share records. And when none of those arguments worked, they simply refused to comply. In the Lopez case, a judge eventually issued terminating sanctions, essentially ruling that Watchtower had forfeited its right to defend itself in the case due to its refusal to produce documents. Lopez was awarded $13.5 million. Watchtower appealed, arguing that terminating sanctions were too harsh and that the court should have imposed lesser penalties first, like monetary fines. The appellate court agreed and sent the case back. Then came the Osbaldo Padrón case. Padrón, like Lopez, had been victimized by Gonzalo Campos. His attorney, again Erwin Zalkin, made the same request: produce the database. Watchtower again refused. This time, Superior Court Judge Richard Strauss, apparently tired of the organization's obstinance, imposed exactly the kind of sanction Watchtower had suggested in the Lopez appeal: monetary penalties. $4,000 per day. $2,000 for every day Watchtower failed to produce the documents. $2,000 for every day Watchtower failed to search for the documents. The sanctions began accruing in April 2016. Watchtower paid lawyers to fight the order. Watchtower filed appeals. But Watchtower did not produce the documents. By the time the case was settled in early 2018, the fines had exceeded $2 million. Watchtower paid the money rather than hand over the files. Let that sink in. The organization spent over $2 million in sanctions, plus untold legal fees, to keep a database of alleged offenders secret. The obvious question is why. If these are truly records of known or suspected perpetrators of serious crimes against minors, why wouldn't an organization want those names turned over to authorities? Why fight court orders? Why pay millions to keep the information hidden? The answer lies in what those documents would reveal. Not just names of individual accused persons, but patterns of institutional knowledge and inaction. Evidence that headquarters knew about alleged predators and allowed them to remain in positions of authority. Proof that congregation elders reported allegations upward to the organization but not outward to police. Documentation of policies that prioritized reputation over victim safety. The database would show how many times the same accused person was reported by different victims in different congregations. It would reveal whether the organization tracked individuals who moved from one congregation to another. It would demonstrate whether Watchtower took any meaningful action to prevent known accused persons from accessing vulnerable populations. And perhaps most damning, it would expose the gap between Watchtower's public statements and its private practices of documentation without intervention. In court filings and public statements, Watchtower has consistently maintained that its policies comply with the law and that they do not discourage victims or families from reporting crimes to authorities. But the blue envelope system tells a different story. It creates a parallel reporting structure where serious allegations are documented internally but not necessarily reported externally. It centralizes information at headquarters while maintaining strict confidentiality at the local level. It treats serious criminal allegations as a matter for internal religious discipline rather than as crimes requiring immediate law enforcement involvement. The blue envelope policy doesn't operate in isolation. It works in tandem with another Watchtower doctrine that has drawn intense criticism: the two-witness rule. Based on a biblical principle found in Deuteronomy, the organization requires 2 witnesses to establish wrongdoing before taking congregational disciplinary action. In cases involving allegations of serious misconduct against minors, this means that if a victim reports an incident and the accused denies it, the elders are instructed to leave matters in Jehovah's hands, unless a second witness comes forward or additional victims report similar conduct by the same person. Think about the practical reality of this policy. Serious crimes against minors almost never occur in front of witnesses. Perpetrators isolate their victims precisely to avoid detection. So the two-witness rule becomes a de facto protection for accused individuals. A victim's testimony, no matter how credible, no matter how detailed, is insufficient on its own. The case gets documented. It goes into the blue envelope. It gets filed in the database. But congregationally, nothing happens. The accused remains in good standing. And the victim, if they spoke up at all, learns that their voice doesn't matter. The Australian Royal Commission was particularly scathing in its assessment of this policy. In its report on Jehovah's Witnesses, the Commission found that the organization's retention and continued application of policies such as the two-witness rule showed a serious lack of understanding of the nature of such crimes. The Commission noted that the rule was devised over 2,000 years ago and is inflexibly applied. Multiple courts in different countries have reached similar conclusions. The two-witness rule, combined with the blue envelope reporting system, creates an environment where serious allegations are documented but not prevented, recorded but not reported, known but not acted upon. Which brings us back to the lawsuit filed in November 2025 by Stella Cristina Gomes de Souza. Her complaint alleges that she was victimized beginning in 2011 when she was 12 years old in Brazil. The accused was Angelo Rovietso, a circuit overseer, one of the most senior positions of authority within Jehovah's Witness congregations. According to the lawsuit, the misconduct continued for nearly a year, resulting in severe physical and psychological trauma. Rovietso was later convicted and imprisoned in Brazil for these crimes. This is not an allegation. This is a criminal conviction. But the lawsuit doesn't just target Rovietso. It names the Watchtower corporations and the governing body, alleging that the crimes were enabled by institutional policies. Policies that prohibited reporting incidents to law enforcement without approval from headquarters. Policies that prioritized organizational reputation over victim safety. Policies that, according to the complaint, led to retaliation against Stella for reporting what happened while the perpetrator was protected. We don't know if Angelo Rovietso's name is in the blue envelope database. We don't know if Brazilian elders sent a report to headquarters in that special sealed envelope. But we do know that the system existed. We know it was operational in 2011 when Stella was being victimized. We know it was designed to collect exactly this kind of information. The identity of the accused, the nature of the allegations, the frequency, the reputation of the accused, whether anyone else knew. And we know that the organization has fought for over a decade to keep that information secret, even when ordered by courts to release it. Stella's case is not unique. It's part of a documented pattern. In Montana, a jury awarded $35 million to a woman who reported allegations to elders, only to have the accused expelled and then reinstated a year later. In California, Candace Conti was awarded $28 million after proving that congregation elders knew her perpetrator, Jonathan Kendrick, had a history of similar misconduct but still paired him with her for door-to-door ministry when she was 9 years old. In the United Kingdom, courts have upheld rulings against Watchtower for failing to protect victims. In Australia, the Royal Commission documented systemic failure. And in every one of these cases, the same questions arise. What did headquarters know? When did they know it? What did they do about it? And the blue envelope system is at the center of those questions because it proves that headquarters was collecting information. They were building a database. They knew. The question isn't whether they had the information. The question is what they did with it. Or more accurately, what they didn't do with it. Let's talk about what $2 million in court sanctions could have bought. Comprehensive background checks for every adult working with minors in every congregation worldwide. Professional training for elders on mandatory reporting laws. Victim advocacy services. Therapy for survivors. Prevention programs. Accountability systems. Instead, that money went to lawyers and court fines, all to keep a database hidden. And that $2 million is just the sanctions in one case. It doesn't include the tens of millions paid out in verdicts and settlements. It doesn't include ongoing legal fees across dozens of active cases. The financial cost of secrecy is staggering, but the human cost is incalculable. Every name in that database represents a victim. Every entry represents trauma. Every blue envelope that arrived at headquarters represented a moment when the organization had information and had to make a choice about what to do with it. And over, according to court findings and investigative reports, the choice was documentation over intervention, recording over reporting, institutional protection over victim safety. The blue envelope system is still in place. the database still exists. And as cases like Stella Gomes de Souza's work their way through federal courts, the pressure to finally release that information is mounting. Discovery in her case, if it proceeds, could force Watchtower to produce documents about reporting policies, internal communications about protecting or handling accused individuals, and potentially access to portions of the database itself. That's why these lawsuits matter. Not just for individual survivors seeking justice, but for the possibility that institutional secrecy might finally be breached. The blue envelope was never about protecting vulnerable individuals. It was about protecting an organization. It was a system designed to gather intelligence without triggering legal obligations, to document without acting, to know without intervening. And when courts tried to pull back the curtain, to force transparency, the organization chose to pay millions rather than comply. That choice tells you everything you need to know about priorities, about values, about what matters most when reputation and safety come into conflict. Stella Gomes de Souza's lawsuit is now part of that ongoing battle. Her case, if it moves forward, will test whether courts can finally compel the disclosure that has been resisted for over a decade. Whether a survivor from Brazil can force a multinational religious organization to answer for policies that enabled what happened to her. Whether the contents of those blue envelopes, scanned and stored and fiercely guarded, will finally see the light of day. The envelope was blue. The database is secret. But the pattern is clear. And the reckoning, delayed for decades, may finally be arriving.